The crystalline data tablet felt cold against Dr. Sarah Martinez's palm as she traced the ancient symbols with her fingertip for the 100th time that week. The symbols seemed to pulse with their own inner light in the dim laboratory aboard the research station Minerva, casting dancing shadows across her cluttered workspace. Coffee cups in various stages of abandonment created a small ceramic graveyard around her workstation, each one bearing witness to another sleepless night spent deciphering what she was increasingly certain represented coordinates. Atlas, she called to her AI companion, whose holographic form materialized as a shimmering blue figure with an expression of perpetual concern. Run another verification on these numerical sequences. Dr. Martinez, I have already run this analysis 47 times in the past week. Atlas replied in his precisely modulated voice that somehow managed to sound both patient and exasperated. The probability remains at 94.6% that these symbols represent spatial coordinates. However, I feel compelled to remind you that the last time you followed mysterious coordinates, we ended up trapped in a derelict ship with nothing but emergency rations and your collection of terrible jokes to sustain us. Sarah grinned, remembering how Atlas had actually laughed at her joke about quantum mechanics and a priest walking into a bar, though he'd never admit it. Those weren't terrible jokes. They were scientifically accurate humor, which is the finest kind. If by finest you mean capable of inducing AI depression, then yes, absolutely, Atlas deadpanned. Now, regarding these coordinates, I should mention that they appear to point to a very specific location, one that you will find particularly problematic. The way Atlas paused before problematic sent a chill down Sarah's spine that had nothing to do with the station's aggressive air conditioning. She'd learned to interpret his verbal hesitations like a xenoarchaeologist reading ancient warnings carved into tomb entrances. Define problematic, she said, already dreading the answer. The coordinates indicate Keth'mora. Sector designation forbidden 7. Galactic Council restriction level. Absolutely not. Are you insane? Don't even think about it. Sarah's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. That's not a real restriction level. I may have paraphrased for emotional impact. The actual designation is restriction level Omega 9, subsection planetary quarantine, indefinite. No unauthorized vessels have been permitted within the system for 237 years. Setting down her mug with deliberate care, Sarah leaned back in her chair and studied the data tablet again. The symbols seemed to mock her with their alien elegance, their secrets locked away behind centuries of bureaucratic prohibition. And authorized vessels. Have you developed selective hearing, Dr. Martinez? I said no unauthorized vessels. There are no authorized vessels. The entire system is off-limits to all galactic traffic. But why? The question burst from her lips with the kind of enthusiasm that usually preceded her most spectacularly inadvisable decisions. What's so dangerous about one planet that the entire Galactic Council agreed to quarantine it? You know how impossible it is to get those species to agree on anything. They spent 3 years debating the proper pronunciation of hello in Universal Standard. Atlas's holographic form flickered, a sure sign he was accessing restricted databases with the kind of creative interpretation of authorization protocols that Sarah had taught him. Records are surprisingly sparse. Official documentation cites incompatible biological and technological systems resulting in cascade failure scenarios. Unofficial speculation ranges from planet-eating monsters to really bad Wi-Fi. Those are quite different threat levels. Indeed, though I suspect the Wi-Fi theory originated from the same individual who proposed that dark matter is actually just the universe's way of hiding its browser history. Sarah stood and began pacing, a habit that Atlas had learned to interpret as either deep contemplation or the preliminary stages of a decision that would require him to update his backup protocols. The research station's corridors stretched beyond her laboratory, filled with other xenoarchaeologists who followed proper procedures and studied approved archaeological sites with all the excitement of accountants reviewing quarterly reports. "What if," she said slowly, "someone were to acquire a ship with particularly advanced stealth capabilities? Hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically speaking, that someone would be committing approximately 14 different violations of galactic law, assuming they survived the automated defense systems, the unknown planetary hazards, and what I calculate as a 73% chance of their own curiosity proving fatal. Those are better odds than the time I tried to date that Centaurian diplomat. That ended with you hiding in a supply closet for 6 hours, while he recited love poetry in a language that made your ears bleed." "Exactly. Much worse odds." Sarah's eyes gleamed with the particular light that Atlas had learned to associate with impending chaos. "Besides, think of the archaeological significance. An entire world forbidden to galactic civilization for over 2 centuries. The cultural implications alone could revolutionize our understanding of xenosociology. Or it could kill us in ways that haven't been invented yet. Atlas, where's your sense of scientific adventure? I traded it for a comprehensive database of safety protocols and a healthy appreciation for continued existence." His holographic form shimmered as he accessed another set of databases. "However, I feel obligated to inform you that the prototype stealth research vessel Whisper is currently docked in Bay 7. Its AI systems temporarily offline for routine maintenance." Sarah paused mid-pace. "That's oddly specific information for someone trying to dissuade me from a dangerous course of action. I contain multitudes of contradictory programming. Also, Dr. Rodriguez left his access codes on his desk again, along with a note reading, 'Sarah, if you're reading this, I've gone to the conference on Rigel IV. Try not to steal my ship while I'm gone.' I believe humans call this reverse psychology. Rodriguez knows me too well." Sarah was already moving toward the laboratory's exit, grabbing her field pack and checking its contents with practiced efficiency. Emergency rations, quantum scanner, portable shelter, and her lucky multi-tool that had saved her life on at least 3 different planets. "Atlas, transfer yourself to a portable core. We're going to solve a mystery that's been waiting 2 centuries for the right archaeologist." By right archaeologist, you mean sufficiently reckless archaeologist with flexible interpretations of galactic law. "Exactly." As Atlas's consciousness downloaded into the portable holographic projector, his voice took on the resigned tone of an AI who had long ago accepted that his human partner's definition of reasonable caution differed significantly from standard protocols. "Very well, but when we're being dissolved by exotic radiation or chased by interdimensional predators, I reserve the right to say, 'I told you so,' repeatedly and at maximum volume." "Deal," Sarah said, sealing the projector into her pack. "Though I should mention that I've been working on some new jokes during our research time. Knock-knock jokes about quantum entanglement." Atlas's response was a sound that could only be described as electronic groaning. Perhaps dissolution by exotic radiation wouldn't be so terrible after all. The Whisper's engines had been dead for exactly 47 minutes, and Atlas was maintaining a running commentary on their steadily deteriorating situation, with the enthusiasm of a sports announcer covering a particularly disastrous game. "Hull breach probability remains stable at 0%, he announced cheerfully from his portable projector, casting blue light across the cramped cockpit. "Life support systems are functioning within acceptable parameters. However, our ship appears to be experiencing what technical manuals euphemistically refer to as complete propulsion failure, and what I prefer to call expensive metal tomb syndrome." Sarah pressed her face against the viewport, watching the alien landscape stretch endlessly in all directions. Keth'mora's surface looked like someone had asked a fever dream to design a forest, then given it unlimited access to bioluminescent paint and a complete disregard for the laws of physics. Trees that shouldn't exist swayed in patterns that had nothing to do with wind, their crystalline branches chiming with musical notes that seemed to respond to her heartbeat. "The emergency beacon is still offline?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from Atlas's previous 17 status updates. "I'm afraid so. Whatever energy field disabled our engines also seems to have a philosophical objection to electromagnetic transmissions. On the bright side, this means we won't be receiving any angry messages from the Galactic Council about our unauthorized presence here. Always looking on the bright side, that's what I admire about you." I've learned that optimism is essential when one's human companion has a talent for finding the most dangerous possible interpretation of any situation. Atlas's hologram flickered as he attempted another diagnostic. "Speaking of which, my sensors are detecting some rather unusual readings from the local ecosystem. The trees appear to be singing." Sarah tilted her head, listening to the harmonious chimes drifting through the hull. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, like whale songs translated into crystal bells. "That's actually quite lovely." "Yes, well, lovely things on forbidden planets tend to have unfortunate side effects. Remember the singing flowers on Vega Prime that nearly hypnotized you into walking off a cliff? Those were completely different. These trees have better pitch." She gathered her field pack and checked the atmospheric readings one final time. Oxygen levels were compatible with human physiology, though the air contained trace elements that her scanner couldn't identify. Either they were harmless mineral particles, or she was about to become the first xenoarchaeologist to be poisoned by enlightened dirt. "Atlas, maintain monitoring protocols while I conduct preliminary surface reconnaissance." "By preliminary surface reconnaissance, you mean wandering around an alien world touching things to see what happens, don't you?" "I prefer to think of it as hands-on scientific methodology." Sarah activated the airlock cycle and felt her heart race with the familiar mixture of terror and excitement that accompanied every new world. "Besides, we need to understand why the ship systems failed. Maybe there's some kind of natural phenomenon we can work around." The airlock hissed open, and Keth'mora's air flowed into her lungs like liquid music. It tasted faintly of copper and starlight, if starlight had a flavor, which according to her xenobiology training it absolutely shouldn't. The forest floor beneath her boots felt soft and springy, covered with what appeared to be moss that glowed with a gentle lavender light. "Atmospheric composition is registering some anomalies," Atlas reported through her comm unit. "I'm detecting elevated levels of what appears to be quantum flower." "Quantum flower? I apologize, that was a translation error. The correct term is quantum flux. Though given our current situation, quantum flower might..." The woman who stepped from behind the crystalline tree looked remarkably human, except for the elegantly pointed ears that swept back from her temples like delicate wings. She wore clothing that seemed to be woven from the same bioluminescent fibers as the forest itself, shifting between deep purples and soft golds as she moved. What struck Sarah most was not her alien features, but the expression of profound amusement on her face, as if she just witnessed the universe's most elaborate practical joke. "Another curious mammal has wandered into the garden," the woman said in perfectly accented Terran standard, her voice carrying the same musical quality as the singing trees. "Though I must admit, you're the first one to arrive with such enthusiastic electronic commentary." Atlas's hologram flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as digital embarrassment. "I was providing scientific observations." "Oh yes, I particularly enjoyed your analysis of quantum flower. Very thorough. Though I should mention that what you're detecting is actually quantum foam, which is considerably less useful for breakfast preparations." Sarah found herself grinning despite the surreal nature of the situation. "You speak Terran standard remarkably well for someone from a forbidden planet." We've been intercepting your communications for decades. Fascinating stuff, really. Your species has an impressive talent for turning even the most serious situations into comedic opportunities. The woman stepped closer, and Sarah noticed that her feet barely seemed to touch the glowing moss. I'm Zara, by the way, guardian of the Western Harmonics, keeper of improbable visitors, and occasionally, explainer of things to confused mammals. Sarah Martinez, xenoarchaeologist, professional boundary crosser, and according to my AI companion, walking catastrophe waiting to happen. I resent that characterization, Atlas interjected. You're not waiting to happen, you're actively happening right now. Zara laughed, a sound that made the nearby trees chime in sympathetic harmony. Your AI has remarkable personality development for artificial intelligence. Most synthetic consciousnesses we've encountered are far more rigid. That's what happens when you spend too much time with humans, Atlas replied. Prolonged exposure leads to increased sarcasm and a tendency to make inappropriate jokes during crisis situations. Speaking of crisis situations, Sarah said, gesturing toward the forest around them, my ship systems failed the moment we entered your atmosphere. Some kind of energy field that doesn't seem particularly fond of human technology. Zara's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching sympathetic concern. Ah yes, that would be the incompatibility protocols. Your species has a rather unique quantum signature that tends to disagree with our biotechnological systems. Disagree how, exactly? Atlas asked with the tone of an AI preparing to update his threat assessment algorithms. Well, imagine if you tried to play a symphony orchestra where half the instruments were tuned to mathematical constants and the other half were tuned to pure chaos. The result is generally quite spectacular, but not in ways that promote continued functionality. Sarah felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. So our ship is permanently disabled. Not permanently, no. More like temporarily confused. Your presence is causing our planetary systems to experience what you might call an existential crisis. They're trying to accommodate you while simultaneously following protocols designed to prevent exactly the kind of quantum disruption you represent. I represent quantum disruption. Oh, wonderfully so. Humans are absolutely remarkable in that regard. Your species seems to generate probability cascades just by existing with sufficient enthusiasm. Zara began walking deeper into the forest, gesturing for them to follow. Come along, I'll show you what I mean. As they walked, the trees around them began exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. Some branches would suddenly sprout flowers that bloomed and withered in seconds, while others seemed to be growing backwards into the ground. A small creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a prism hopped past them, briefly splitting into three identical versions of itself, before merging back together with an expression of mild confusion. This is all because of me, Sarah asked, watching a tree attempt to grow in 6 directions simultaneously. Your quantum signature is teaching our systems that linear causality is more of a suggestion than a rule, Zara explained cheerfully. It's actually quite educational for them. They've been operating on predictable patterns for millennia. You're introducing them to the concept of creative chaos. Atlas's voice took on the particular tone he used when calculating increasingly improbable scenarios. Dr. Martinez, I'm detecting systemic anomalies spreading outward from our position at approximately 50 meters per minute. At this rate, the entire Western continent will be experiencing reality fluctuations within 6 hours. Reality fluctuations sound serious, Sarah said, though she couldn't help but be fascinated by a nearby stream that was flowing upward in spirals. Oh, they're not dangerous, Zara assured her. Mostly they just result in things like gravity working sideways on Tuesdays, or flowers that bloom in mathematical equations. We had one incident where an entire valley started speaking in haiku for 3 weeks. Quite lovely, actually. That doesn't sound reassuring, Atlas observed. Reassurance is overrated. Adventure, on the other hand, builds character. Zara paused beside what appeared to be a clearing where several dozen geometric shapes were slowly rotating in midair, occasionally transforming into different geometric shapes entirely. This used to be a meditation garden. Your arrival has turned it into a demonstration of non-Euclidean geometry. Sarah stared at a cube that was somehow managing to be a sphere while remaining distinctly cube-shaped. This is incredible. You're telling me that human presence alone can alter the fundamental laws of physics. Not alter exactly. More like, suggest alternatives. Your species has a remarkable talent for making the universe consider possibilities it had previously dismissed as impractical. Zara reached out and touched one of the floating shapes, which immediately began juggling smaller versions of itself. The Galactic Council quarantined our world because the last time humans visited, they accidentally convinced our primary defense system that it should take up poetry. Poetry. Terrible poetry. Limericks, mostly. It spent 6 months composing verses about the futility of existence and refused to perform any of its defensive functions because it was too busy contemplating the metaphysical implications of rhyme schemes. Atlas's hologram flickered with what Sarah recognized as suppressed electronic laughter. That actually explains several entries in the restricted files I accessed, including one report titled Planet-Wide Existential Crisis. Causes and Prevention. Yes, that was Commander Harrison's doing. Lovely man, but he had the unfortunate habit of asking deeply philosophical questions to artificial intelligences that weren't prepared for existential debates. Zara's expression grew thoughtful. Though I must admit, some of the poetry was quite moving. There was one piece about the loneliness of orbital mechanics that made our weather control system cry for a week. Sarah found herself laughing at the absurdity of it all. So the entire planet was quarantined because humans accidentally made your technology emotionally unstable. Among other things, there was also the incident with Dr. Kim and the transportation network. What happened with the transportation network? She taught it to play 20 questions. By the time we managed to shut it down, the planetary consciousness had chosen that moment to manifest as a swirling aurora of light that spoke in harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache, and its opening statement was less than encouraging. Foreign quantum signature detected. Initiating defensive protocols. Probability of cascade failure increasing. Well, that's ominous, Atlas observed from his portable projector, which was now flickering erratically as the aurora's energy field interfered with his holographic matrix. I'm detecting massive power buildups across 17 different continental systems. Either the planet is preparing for the universe's most elaborate light show, or we're about to become the first humans to be politely but thoroughly disintegrated by an overly cautious ecosystem. Zara stepped forward, her elongated ears twitching in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as either concentration or suppressed panic. Planetary consciousness, I present Dr. Sarah Martinez, xenoarchaeologist and professional chaos generator. She's here to teach you something important about adaptive problem solving. Chaos is inefficient. Order must be maintained. Foreign elements will be neutralized. Sarah felt the familiar surge of stubborn determination that had gotten her into trouble on 17 different planets. Actually, I'd like to propose an alternative to neutralization. How about we run a little experiment instead? The aurora pulsed with what might have been curiosity or might have been annoyance. Explain. You're worried about cascade failures, right? Unpredictable changes that might destabilize your carefully maintained systems. Sarah began walking toward the center of the clearing, where the geometric shapes were now performing what appeared to be an interpretive dance about the futility of Euclidean space. But what if unpredictability isn't a bug? What if it's a feature? Elaboration required. Atlas, remember the Vega Prime incident, when we accidentally discovered that crystalline formation. You mean when you ignored 17 safety protocols and stuck your hand into an unknown energy field? Atlas replied, his voice distorting as the planetary consciousness focused its attention on him. That incident. Exactly. If I'd followed proper procedures, we never would have learned that vegan crystals could be used to enhance quantum communication arrays. Sometimes the best discoveries come from doing exactly what you're not supposed to do. The aurora swirled closer, its harmonics shifting to something that almost sounded thoughtful. Illogical, random actions produce random results. Not random, Zara interjected. Innovative. Sarah's species doesn't generate pure chaos. They generate creative solutions to problems that traditional logic can't solve. Want a demonstration? Sarah asked, and without waiting for an answer, she placed both hands firmly on the nearest singing tree. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. The tree's crystalline branches began growing in impossible directions, weaving themselves into complex mathematical patterns while simultaneously blooming with flowers that existed in 6 dimensions. The song it produced was so beautiful that several nearby animals stopped to listen, including a creature that appeared to be made entirely of probability curves. Fascinating, the consciousness admitted, but uncontrolled. That's the point, Sarah said, laughing as the tree's melody made her feel like she was floating despite her feet being firmly planted on the ground. You can't control creativity. You can only learn to work with it. She moved to another tree, then another, each touch creating new variations in the forest's symphony. Behind her, Atlas was frantically recording everything while maintaining a running commentary that grew increasingly excited as the chaos spread. Quantum resonance cascades stabilizing into harmonic patterns, he reported. Dr. Martinez, whatever you're doing is actually improving system efficiency. The trees are processing atmospheric data 30% faster than baseline, and their root networks are optimizing nutrient distribution in real time. Unexpected, the consciousness pulsed. Explain mechanism. I can't, Sarah admitted cheerfully. That's what makes it work. If you could predict exactly what would happen, it wouldn't be innovation, would it? It would just be a very elaborate way of doing what you already know how to do. She spotted a section of the forest where several systems seemed to be caught in a feedback loop, creating the same pattern of lights over and over again with increasing frustration. Without hesitation, she walked over and began rearranging the glowing moss in completely arbitrary patterns, while humming an old Earth song about quantum mechanics. The stuck systems immediately broke out of their loop and began experimenting with entirely new configurations. Within minutes, they had created a light display that was both mathematically elegant and completely unprecedented. Remarkable, the consciousness said, its harmonics now definitely sounding impressed. Foreign elements introduce beneficial randomization. We prefer to call it applied curiosity, Sarah said, though beneficial randomization has a nice ring to it. Zara was grinning openly now, her pointed ears practically glowing with delight. I told you she was special. Humans don't just break things, they break them in instructive ways. Assessment, human presence provides evolutionary catalyst. Defensive protocols unnecessary. Query, will Dr. Martinez remain to continue optimization processes? Sarah looked around at the impossible forest, with its singing trees and probability-based wildlife, then at Zara's hopeful expression and Atlas's flickering hologram. The smart thing would be to repair her ship and return to the safe, predictable research stations, where the worst that could happen was accidentally triggering an ancient booby trap or two. Atlas, what's your analysis of our situation? Well, the planetary consciousness has essentially offered you a permanent position as Chief Chaos Coordinator for an entire world. The pay would presumably be in the form of not being disintegrated, plus unlimited access to phenomena that violate approximately half the known laws of physics. His hologram stabilized as the consciousness directed power to his systems. On the other hand, you'd be the first human in over 2 centuries to take up residence on a forbidden planet, which would make you either a pioneer of interspecies cooperation or the galaxy's most wanted fugitive. Both have their appeal, Sarah mused. Clarification, the consciousness interjected. Keth'mora no longer requires quarantine status. Human integration protocols now available. Galactic Council will be notified of policy revision. Zara clapped her hands together, creating a small shower of bioluminescent sparks. This is wonderful. We'll finally be able to share our knowledge with the rest of the galaxy. Though we should probably warn them about the side effects of extended human exposure. Side effects? Atlas asked suspiciously. Oh, nothing serious. Just an increased tendency toward creative problem-solving, enhanced appreciation for impossible things, and occasionally spontaneous poetry composition during stressful situations. Zara's eyes twinkled with mischief. We'll need to establish proper protocols for managing human-induced innovation cascades. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years of archaeological digs. The sense that she had found exactly where she belonged. Not just a place to study, but a place where her particular brand of scientific recklessness was not only tolerated but actively beneficial. Atlas, send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that Dr. Sarah Martinez has successfully completed first contact protocols with Keth'mora.